Hey guys, welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. And today we're going to follow up on the Q&A that I posted a month ago. I got a lot of great question submissions, and let's see how many of those we can answer right now. So I'm going in the order that they were submitted, either by on the video or via email. Question: is that a spare iFan plate behind you, or was it temporarily removed from an otherwise complete fan? Well, let's talk about this. This is the plate I'm sure they're asking about. It has the Bentley I, letter I, Roman numeral 1 grill. And if you've seen the Bentley I have that has the ornate, it's a polished brass fan with an ornate antique brass sideband. This is the bottom plate from that fan because Bob Gould also gave me an ornate bottom plate that was destined to be put on that fan and just never got to it. And so, of course, I immediately put that bottom plate on the fan, and I kept this one. So this is technically a spare as long as that fan stays ornate. I don't know why it wouldn't, because with that antique brass sideband, I can't think of a reason to have that on there. Do you know any Hunter history regarding how they suddenly branched out in the 80s, having only produced the original for decades before? I mean, it's pretty obvious in terms of when they were the only game in town, all they had to sell was the original. And now there's a lot of imports coming in that are cheaper, and there's a lot of different options. The original isn't exactly the quietest or most efficient fan, and so they have to come up with rubber flywheel fans. They have to come up with imports. They have to come up with cheaper options. Now, what I've heard through the industry grapevine, and it's on my list to talk to somebody from Gulf Coast to confirm this, is that the original Hunter imports, such as the Comfort Breeze, were originally a Dan's Fan City exclusive, and then they later branched out. Newspaper ads seem to imply otherwise, because it seems like the Comfort Breeze was offered pretty early. I do plan on doing a video series specifically on the Comfort Breeze if I have the time and if I can find enough information, so we may learn more. But that's a good starting point. Do you have any info on the earliest accounts of ceiling fans falling? I know Antiques had some design problems. I wouldn't say that I know that Antiques had design problems. They were heavy and they required a J-hook, and you generally didn't want to reverse a J-hook. And they hung pretty low. There wasn't a lot of clearance. But I don't know that I would necessarily call that design problems. If you go through case law, you can find a lot of legal cases about fans falling that date back well before the 60s. And by the way, one of the things that is on my list of topics to cover is ceiling fan lawsuits. That said, when I talk about the ceiling fan lawsuits, I'm probably not going to cover most of the injury lawsuits about fans falling, because there's just so many and they're all the same. And usually they're blaming the contractor and not the fan manufacturer. I think it would be interesting as well to make a video about all the kinds of ceiling fan recalls, like Casablanca, Hang True, and Key Largo. I've thought about that, and it used to be that all of that recall information was available on the web. Unfortunately, a lot of it isn't anymore, so I may have to spend some time on archive.org and see what I can still find. I know when I used to work for, was it called Ceiling Fan Depot, Ceiling Fans and More? One of the websites I used to work for, I had a whole page on recalls, and I might be able to find that document that would be accurate as of the year that it was written. While I'm looking at some of the other questions, I'm actually going to search my hard drive and perhaps see if I have a copy of it on my hard drive here. We'll just see. We'll let that search while I... Would you ever consider doing separate videos about either Emerson, Deal, Westinghouse, Century, or GE? Okay. So, Emerson we've covered a lot. There are a lot of Workbench videos about Emerson, and they have contributed so many different things to fans over the years that I don't think one video could sum it up. We have a blender fan video. We have a model names video. I'm sure I'll do more about Emerson, because they are one of the longest running, until recently, companies in the fan business, and they contributed so much. So I'm sure this won't be the end of Emerson. But you know, I don't think there'll be one comprehensive Emerson video. Deal, I'm trying to think of who bought out Deal. I don't know if I'm gonna look and see if that's available on the web. But they were one of those companies that they only did fans for, you know, a certain era, and then after a certain point, they no longer did ceiling fans. I don't really know what happened with them. I guess that's the topic I could cover. Westinghouse, as we know, they started out as a fan and motor company, and then they became a huge conglomerate that made, just like Emerson and Fasco, where they started out with small fans, and they became a much bigger company than, than what they started with. And then near the end, they licensed their name back to Angelo Brothers. And we've talked about that in the NCon video. I guess I could do, excuse me, I guess I could do a Workbench video specifically on the popular brands of antiques. Maybe sum all that up in one video. I don't know that I'm the guy for that. My area of expertise generally is more in the vintage era. And I feel like there's probably some antiques collectors that could do it off the top of their head. I would have to do some research. But if there's a demand for it, and if I run out of other content, I'll consider it, Also, an interesting fact, I'm not sure I told you this, but apparently my grandfather was president or vice president of sales for NCon. Well, I'd love to talk to them if they're still around. I've heard plenty of NCon stories and used to be friends with one of the founders of NCon, but I'm always looking to learn more and hear more stories. For the Q&A, what were the interesting Sonicas? To me, when Sonica was in business, I was kind of one of those rubber flywheel is king kind of guys. And so they had a model that had the rubber flywheel. I don't remember the name of it. Buckingham, maybe? I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but you can find it in the Sonica catalog. Maybe it was a Madison? No, it was Concord Madison was their rubber flywheel fan. Same thing, though. Just looked like an Emerson Premium, basically. And I had one of those Sonicas. It had a giant spinner motor in it. It was gunmetal or black chrome. So that was my favorite Sonica model. The rest of them were just basically knockoffs of, Minka and Quorum fans of the time, like the Telstar. So I don't feel like they had any too interesting models. But if you're curious, you can go look in the Sonica catalogs. I believe I have a few slideshows, or they might be posted in my advertising slideshows. I also have some newspaper ads featuring Sonica that are in the advertising slideshows. And there's probably something available on iHeartFans. We now have a partnership with iHeartFans. I've contributed a lot of catalogs to them recently, which I wasn't able to do in the past. So definitely go check there. Can you do a Kichler ceiling fan workbench video? Again, that's not really my era. They've only been doing fans pretty recently. That's the kind of thing I'd love to see from vintage fans and more. Again, if I run out of other content and I can find everything that I need to with research, then I'll do it. But I'm more than happy to leave those things to people who are specifically interested in those topics. Would you consider doing a topic about Builder's Square, like Forever Fans, Contrast, and Top Union, if you haven't done that topic already? I would. I am specifically researching Contrast and Top Union, because either if you follow this series, or if you know me personally, then you know that one of the things that's important to me is making sure we actually credit the correct OEM and not just assuming what the factory was called. And I don't know if Contrast and Top Union are actually the factory name, or if those were relabels, or if those were middlemen, or whatnot. And it's on my list. I've been trying to research those two names and get to the bottom of. Because again, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors in the import fan industry, and still is. A lot of companies want you to believe that they're a factory when they're just a middleman. And I don't want to give them credit for those illusions. I want to credit where the credit is actually due. So that is on my list, and I am currently researching it. How many ceiling fans do you own? I don't have a count. When people ask, I say it's probably around 500. I had a whole lot in my mom's basement that was flooded, and we got them all out of my mom's basement, but what we don't know is how many survived the flood, because we haven't unpacked all the boxes yet. With me having been sick the past few years, and many other things that have, it's just, there's only so much time in the day, and it's on our list to go through and see how many of them survived. But if the majority of them survived, I think that 500 number is accurate, or perhaps even a little conservative. The main differences between a K55 and a K63. Well, I am going to cover this in a separate video, but let's talk about it now. So, I've heard a few different theories about what the 55 in K55 stands for. I've heard it stands for, essentially, but people claim it's either the width, the height, or the air gap. And the one that makes the most sense is the width, because that is the thing that is consistent among K55, and then K63 is bigger. So it makes sense that the 63 would be 60, you know, 63 millimeters or whatever it is versus the 55. I don't know what that numbers actually stand for. But different people who've worked at Casablanca, Emerson, etc. have different claims as to what the nomenclature actually is. But the main differences between the K55 and the K63, other than the name and what the name allegedly stands for, again, the K55 is smaller, it is better ventilated, it has better structure as far as a stationary shaft for mounting a light kit, and it is designed from inception to be reversible. And that's because the K55 was designed from inception to be a ceiling fan motor. The K63 was a motor they took off the line that they were using for other things, and they modified it for ceiling fans. And so it's not designed. Ceiling fan motors are unique amongst different types of motors because they're relatively low RPM. 200 to 300 RPM is much lower than motors that are used in HVAC and washing machines and other uses that are very similar in terms of the type of motor, but those are thousands of RPM oftentimes. And also, with washing machines and HVAC and stuff like that, it doesn't run constantly. It'll run for a period and then shut off. And so it's built in that it can cool down naturally as opposed to needing constant ventilation. But people often run their ceiling fans on high 24/7 without stop. And the K63 wasn't designed for that, nor was the GE frame motor that was later repurposed for ceiling fans. And a lot of motors that were made for other things and repurposed for ceiling fans were not built that way. The K55 was the first U.S. Made motor that, you know, other than a fan like an original where the motor is the fan and the fan is the motor and they're one and the same. But in terms of a motor that you put in a fan, the K55 was the first one that was designed specifically for ceiling fans. So the size is designed to fit in a ceiling fan housing. The ventilation is designed to run constantly like a ceiling fan. It's reversible. Which again, the early K63s were not reversible and couldn't be made reversible. And so when they made the K55, it's very easy to reverse. You get the idea. So collectors like the K63 because they're older, they're more powerful, and a lot of us saw K63 fans in our early days of either collecting or just being a kid interested in ceiling fans. And so we like them for that reason, or at least I do. But I've often said that, like, if I was going to be speccing fans for a new installation, I would not spec a K63. The K55 is a superior motor. Any idea who made those weird green fans? No. I've heard a few names bandied about. I've heard it was something with brass in the name, which would make sense because other than the green painted parts, those fans are actually made of solid brass, which is not a common thing. I've also heard that they were a in-house item for a department store, like a Macy's or a Gimbel's or something like that, but not one of those, like a less recognizable name. That they were a made in-house item for a certain department store chain. But I don't actually know the name off the top of my head. I've been trying to learn it, and I will continue trying to learn it. Can you do a video about Newtone? So Newtone is another example where it's a massively huge company and fans were a small thing that they did. Unlike Emerson and more like Fasco, fans were a division that they added later and then later fizzled out. So I don't really know what I would cover. I have been trying to reach people at Newtone, or what is now Grown, I think, but what was formerly Newtone, even some retired people who used to work at Newtone. So I could ask them questions like, hey, who are your suppliers? Who came up with this design? That kind of stuff. But I haven't been able to reach anybody yet. If you have any specific questions, please ask them and I will see if I can answer them. This one just says, about Alaska, and I said, what about them? And they never replied. Okay, let's move on to the email questions. When did you first become attracted to or aware of your attraction to ceiling fans? Now, I want to be clear, when people say attracted to ceiling fans, that doesn't mean sexually. It doesn't mean that you have a sexual attraction to ceiling fans, or you know that you identify as a ceiling fan or anything like that. It's just something you like, which you can be attracted to any number of things without it being that sort of thing. So I'm trying to think, because I already liked ceiling fans when my dad bought the first one for our house, which I was probably only 3 or 4 years old, because I remember being disappointed that he got just like a cheap hugger instead of something cool. A lot of my extended family members had cool ceiling fans in their houses. I remember an uncle that's no longer alive had an 1895 or perhaps the Sears version in his dining room. My aunt had a design house. My uncle had an Enviro fan, the little 36-inch gold line. My other uncle had a banana fan. One of my childhood friends down the street that I started playing with when I was pretty young, they had a Casablanca Zephyr and Four Seasons. And then when my mom would go shopping, you know, the grocery stores had CECs, Contex, Enviro fans, etc. The post office had gold lines as well. I don't remember I just know that I already liked them. I think also I used to like dig through the Sunday paper and look at the ads for pictures of ceiling fans. So it's just, I knew that they were something I liked probably as early as I could talk. I just liked them. I just thought they were cool. And still do. I still enjoy looking at a ceiling fan. It's you know. What fans were present in your household growing up? Things your parents had before you became a collector. So I had this conversation the other day. My dad, and God bless him, and I miss him greatly, and loved him greatly. Just great man, but his greatness did not extend to ceiling fan purchases. He bought the cheapest fans that he could possibly buy, which were generally 42-inch huggers in rooms that could have easily fit a 52-inch fan on a down rod. So in the dining room was the first place we got a fan, I think because they didn't like the light that hung there. And he just got a 42-inch 5-blade cane Cool Breeze hugger that was presumably made by Aircool. Had a 3-light turtle fitter with amber glass shades. Second fan was from my room that I shared with my brothers. I don't think my youngest brother had been born yet, but I shared with my younger brother and then later the third kid. I begged for a red fan. I wanted a red Casablanca Delta, or if we couldn't get that, then I wanted the red turn of the century that Menard sold. And instead I got a blue 42-inch design house hugger because it was cheaper. And I hated that thing. And then the next fan that we got was in his bedroom. And I begged him to get a real fan instead of going the cheap route, to go to Crescent Lighting, which was the closest lighting showroom, and buy a fan from the lighting showroom. And so he got a real fan, but it ended up being a Thomas from when they were having the like Halsey imported fans. And he installed it poorly, so it always wobbled, and he hated it and I hated it, and so on and so forth. And then after that, the next fan I got to pick out myself, which was when I was in 3rd grade, and I finally got my own room, and I got an SMC DC42 because he gave me a budget of $100 for the fan, light kit, and control, and that was the fan that was within that budget. And again, I believed him when he said only a 42-inch fan would fit. Otherwise, I would have gone with a bigger fan. So I think that counts because after that point, I started getting involved. Because after 3rd grade, I think 4th grade is when I got on my bike and bought my first fan with my own money. So how old were you when you bought your first fan? Well, we just talked about that. 3rd grade for the one that my dad bought for me that I got to pick out. And then 4th grade, got on my bike and found a Sears. No, not Sears. It was the Emerson Designer. That was the brown 52-inch. I still have that fan somewhere if it survived the flood. Love that fan. How old were you where you installed your first fan? What was it? Do you still have it? If not, what was its fate? Well, let's count that SMC. Because me and my dad did that together, but I think I did just as much, if not more, of the install than him. And I can't honestly remember what came after that. So, what was its fate? I do not still have it. So what happened was, this is an interesting story, at least to me. So, remember I told you I had an uncle that had an Enviro fan in his kitchen, a brown 36-inch gold line that I loved. And I went to visit them one day, and it had been replaced by an Encon Casanova 42-inch hugger. I was heartbroken. I asked my aunt what happened, and she said, oh, I wanted one that had a, pull chain. And so the guy from the hardware store swapped it out. He probably has the old one. Just so happened that she had gone to the same hardware store that I like to go to that had the Designer installed. Still does have the Designer installed to this day, Doran Hardware. I found the guy, and he said, well, I already gave that fan to a friend of mine to use in his shop. And I was like, well, it's so important to me. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you bring me another fan, I'll trade it to him. The only other fan I had at the time was the DC42, so I traded him the DC42 for the gold line. No regrets. Did you have any childhood friends that were also interested in vintage ceiling fans? Well, we've talked before and even met him in a video. My friend Joey, who also went by Zev, who also went by Boots, who I called Uga because he played the trumpet, is the one who named the blender fan. And he was moderately interested in ceiling fans. Like, he had never thought about them before. I was like, hey, ceiling fans are cool. And he's like, you know what? They kind of are. And to this day, he still loves Hunter Originals and blender fans. Shout out to him. If you could bring one vintage ceiling fan back into production exactly as it was made back in the day, what model would you choose? Exactly as it was made back in the day is where it gets complicated for me, because I've always thought about bringing the blender fan back. I've thought about bringing the Terra back. I've thought about bringing the Island fans back. There's a whole lot of, I thought about bringing the Sonidair back, the Leslie Lock with the baseball bat shaped blades. There's a whole lot of fans that I've thought about bringing back, but they would not be a great fan for today's market, or there's just things I would need to change, whether it was for the market or for safety or efficiency or so on and so forth. And so without changing anything, I think I'd have to go with, I've often said that if I could only have one fan and one fan only, I would probably have a Bentley. And I think I'd have to go with that, because I think that design is Art Deco enough that it would work for a few different decors. They were offered in myriad finishes, so I don't have to worry about, like, this finish wasn't offered or it's just polished brass, because, yeah, these were offered in any finish you could ask for. I think probably that would be, because, again, there's really nothing about it that needs to change. It was very well made and well designed, and already offered in myriad finishes and blade sizes and blade types. Light adaptable, different control types were offered. I guess, I don't know if this counts, obviously, if it was offered as a remote fan. The remote that they offered would not fly today, but I don't think that. I think that's getting too much into the weeds. What vintage fan would you most like to stumble upon into a warehouse full of new in box? That's a good answer. K63 blender fans is a good answer. Union Gold lines is a good answer. Dayton Lascos is a good answer. That's another one I've always thought about bringing back, but again, there'd have to be some changes made. These were, yeah, so again, this is getting way into the weeds, because, like, these were sold with the blades separately. So am I stumbling into a warehouse with just the motor, or are the blades there? Are there blades that go to motors? Is it a mismatch? So we'll throw that out for the time being. I think blender K63 3-blade blender fans. They're unipack with the blades. There's a million you could do. There's so many installs I could do with them. If I stumbled into a warehouse with them, there'd be plenty to do. You know, they generally survived. Like, they don't have flywheel rot issues or you know, bearings that are really terrible from sitting, like a lot of unions do. So I'm gonna go with K63 blender fans, final answer. But there's a lot of yeah, that we could talk about that for half an hour just by itself. In general, what is your favorite fan finish and why? I'd say brown and antique brass, because it goes with, you know, most fans look good in it, and it goes with most decors. If brown and antique brass isn't an option, then probably just all antique brass. You know, it's nothing fancy, but most fans look good in it, and it just universally goes. Brown and polished brass is another good one, but sometimes the polished brass is too bright. Depends on the fan. What is your least favorite fan finish and why? I would say white and brass. There are most fans I hate in white and brass. There are some exceptions, like Newtone verandas and Fascos, and certain fans look really good in white and brass, but in general, most fans look terrible in white and brass, in my opinion. What is your favorite OEM vintage control system? Pull chain, variable speed, choke, etc. I'm going to go with the cardboard box variable speed. It's consistent. If the fan is designed right, it's not too noisy. Yeah, it's cardboard box variable speed, final answer. Of the women you have dated or otherwise been involved with, what have there been reactions when they learn you collect ceiling fans? Oh, women love it. And that's the thing I've always told other collectors that feel like they have to hide their interest. Oh no, trust me. When women find out, or men, whatever it is that you date or you're attracted to, you know, find out that there's something that you're knowledgeable about and passionate about, that is a huge turn on. I've never been on a date with anybody who has been turned off by my interest in ceiling fans, and I have been on a lot of dates. And I've also been happily married for 10 years, and my wife is very supportive. She does not like the same fans that I like, with few exceptions, but she's very supportive. Without disclosing locations, have you personally liberated ceiling fans from abandoned buildings? If so, what fans? Well, it depends on... I've never taken fans from an abandoned building without permission. I've done it a bunch of times with permission, and the first one, and rather than just tell all the stories, I'll tell the first story. I went into an abandoned steakhouse and pulled out 6 originals, and those were the originals that were in 12 wings. And, no, the Burger King came first. Burger King that was being torn down. I got the key from the construction guy or the building owner or whoever. Went in, pulled down. There was no electricity, completely dark. Just went in there by ourselves and took the fans down. The only difference to doing it with and without permission is if you have a key. You mentioned being thrown out of a Chicago restaurant because you asked to buy the fans. Have you had any other unexpected reactions to your interest in ceiling fans? Well, it wasn't a restaurant. It was a print shop. But yes, there's a store near me, and if you want to know where it is, I'll tell you, because you can try, that has a gold line, and the store is for sale. The building's going to be torn down, but right now, until the sale goes through, they're still in business. And they have a gold line, Union Gold Line. I walked in there with $200 cash in my pocket and said, I want to buy your ceiling fan. And they didn't exactly throw me out, but it was very clear that their response was like, get out and don't come back. And I've tried 3 times, and each of the 3 times, the guy's been like, basically the nicest possible way that you can say, get the fuck out of here. And I don't understand why he won't take my $200 for the fan. So, because the building's going to be torn down. What else? People just don't believe, like, they believe that I collect ceiling fans, but they don't believe the ones that I collect. Like, I'll be like, I want this blender fan. They're like, that's not that old. Why do you want this? That's a piece of shit. I'm like, no, I want that. No, don't you want something antique, like from the 50s? No, blender fan. Even a friend of mine who was an AFCA guy had Dayton Lascos in his shop, and I begged him for them, and he threw them out because he didn't believe that I truly wanted those crappy fans. So that's generally what it is. People have no problem with you collecting ceiling fans. They don't understand why you like the ones you like. If you could interview Burton, but you could only ask 2 questions, what would they be? I might have to come back to that one. I don't really feel like there's a whole lot I have to ask Burton. I feel like Burton, of all the fan legends, has been the most well documented. There's plenty, because everybody that knew him, everybody that worked with him, even his competitors, all have stories to tell about him, and they all loved him. So I feel like there's not a lot that's unanswered. I think I would just ask him what his favorite ceiling fan designs were, or what his first favorite Casablanca product was. And I think I'd really like to know what inspired him to pick the fans that he picked that became the Casablanca fans, in terms of, like, they used certain antiques and they just replicated this part from this one and this part from that one, and they threw it together. And according to Tom, who was there, they just basically used whatever was available and whatever they had, and they, there wasn't any real math or logic to it. But I feel like Burton might have had a little bit more involved in his head as far as why this design and that design and whatnot. What inspired your first Workbench video? Surely the online debate about Lasco versus Sanyo was not the first bit of internet stupidity to ruffle your feathers. This goes deeper, am I right? Not really. The Lasco Sanyo thing has bothered me for years, because originally we thought Lasco was just Lasco, then we learned about Sanyo, and then we learned about what was Lasco and what was Sanyo. And there are certain collectors, I'll call out Chandru, but he's not the only one, he's just the one that I know personally, and I can give him shit, likes to classify all Lascos as Sanyos. And I remember there was a video that right around the time I did the first Workbench video, another collector, someone I know but not as well, had done a video of a Lasco calling in a Sanyo, and I'd commented on it. And then either right around the same time or right after, they'd put out a video talking about how their feelings were hurt because people kept correcting them and something like that. And on the one hand, I felt bad. I don't want to ever hurt anybody's feelings. On the other hand, it's not your fault. People we're starting with theories, and as we learn more, we do better. And just don't hang on to the wrong information after you know better. And it really, it really kind of bothered me that there was this culture among fan collectors of we're sticking with the wrong information even once we know it's wrong, just because so that was the thing. I wanted to address that publicly because I don't want to hurt anybody else's feelings by like pulling them aside and being like, that's wrong, right? But I felt like it needed to be addressed because it's harder to keep learning more new information if you start with a basis of something that's wrong. So that was really all it was. And it was just going to be a one-off. I wasn't really going to do a series. It was just that particular thing. Again, I felt like I couldn't address it privately without risking hurting people's feelings, but it felt like it needed to be addressed, so I decided to just kind of do a slightly comical rant about it, a good-natured rant about it. And since it was so popular, is what prompted me to turn it into a series. That's really what it is. Do you remember seeing any fans you like being installed in their original locations? Oh, like being installed newly. Because they said you're old enough to remember Stratojets being newly installed. Like, do I remember seeing any fans installed? Well, Reese and I just had a conversation earlier today about Hunter Originals being installed in the Milwaukee Public Museum in 1996. And I like Hunter Originals, although the fans that they replaced were cooler. I don't remember actually, I remember showing up at a place and seeing that fans had been installed. In terms of actually seeing the installation process, I don't remember. The example that I'll give for that other one is I walked into a hardware store in Stoughton, Wisconsin, and they had black gold lines. And at that time, I didn't realize EnviroFan was still in business. And this hardware store had just been built, and I was like, oh my God, they just put in new gold lines? They're still making gold lines? And that was when I wrote EnviroFan and asked for a catalog. And I actually just did a video at that hardware store the other day that you can check out. That's probably not public yet, but it'll be on Patreon. So I'll have to think. I don't remember seeing any actually being installed. I do remember my grandpa installing a design house in the dining room of my other grandma, not his wife. So my mom's dad installed a design house in the dining room of my dad's mom. And I remember being there for that, and I think there's even a picture somewhere of me handing him a blade. Name your top 3 childhood installs that most influenced you to become a fan collector. Wow. That's going to be hard to narrow down. I'm going to name all the ones that come immediately to mind, and we'll narrow it down if we have to, and we might also, might be more than 3. These are the ones that come to mind, which may not be the top. So obviously the Terra and the Lumberyard. I think my favorite thing about that, first of all, it's the first time I ever saw a fan over a stairwell. Second of all, I'd been to that lumberyard so many times, and you can see the fan from the ground, but I never noticed it until we went upstairs. And normally I had an eagle eye for fans. So then every time after that I went into that lumberyard, I could see it. And so that was just really cool to me. Blenders in my grandma's church, where I actually did the video there. That's just a really cool blender install. Might be the first time I ever saw blenders. There were also the blenders in the greenhouse, or just the one in the greenhouse, and then the 2 in the Memorial Union dining room. I think we'll give my grandma's church the edge on that one, because that was probably the coolest blender install that I saw at the youngest possible age. The Dayton Lasco on the theater balcony was really cool. The gold line, honestly, in my uncle's kitchen was really cool. The first place I saw Union gold line, honestly, the grocery store that I pulled the Union gold lines out of was a really, really cool install. They were just in a very random pattern. Pete can tell you. So it was like an arched roof like this. You guys have seen the video of the Habitat Restore that's made the same way that grocery store was, the same arched roof. But the Habitat Restore just has fans down the center. The grocery store had rows of 3 and rows of 2 and then sometimes just one in the center. And there was no pattern to it. Like one row would have 3, next row would have 2, next row would have 3, next row would have 1. Completely random. That was a really cool install. Don's Hallmark always had 85 gold lines. Very low to, you know, I could see the labels on them. We're at more than 3, but those are the ones that come immediately to mind. What is your all-time favorite Hunter fan model? Adapter original. That's pretty easy. I would go with polished brass cane if I had to pick a finish. Casablanca. I'm going to go with K63 Broadway / Commodore. But it's tied with the K63 Columbia, if they made a K63 CB1 Victorian, and the so-called Tampa Zephyr. You know, any of those hub mount ones, but of the regular, you know, production models, the Broadway K63, final answer. But K63 Four Seasons and Zephyr is definitely a runner-up because those are huge in my childhood. Emerson, that one's easy. K63 three-blade blender fan. But there's a lot of runners up too. I love so much Emerson. Fasco, I would have said World's Fair a few years ago. It's a tie. It's a tie. 38-inch World's Fair brown and brass cane, or 52-inch ornate parlor brown and brass cane. Final answer. Newtone, Veranda Deluxe brown and brass with either stencil or the fake plastic blades. Runner-up would be the Veranda friction drive, which only reason it doesn't get the top spot is because friction drives are useless. And also the 4-blade Pro line with the small canopy. Lasco, that's easy, the Dayton Lasco. Encon would be the Royalty, which I have yet to find. It's their G-Event Indian-made Crompton Greaves fan. Okay, I know who this one came from. Why do you refuse to insert photos into your presentations, even though everyone would really like photos and become much more engaged? Smiley face to make it seem like they're being nice, when in actuality they're being an asshole. You know why. And I've said this multiple times before, and I'll say it again. And I also, in a perfect world, would love to have this be an interactive thing with graphics. I'd love to basically be the Ceiling Fan Technology Connections. I'm a big fan of Alec and his work. 2 reasons. The first reason is kind of an excuse, kind of not, is that I want to make sure that this can be available as a podcast, and that also if you decide to watch a YouTube video and click off the window, you don't miss anything. Because that's how I watch my YouTube videos. I put them on, and then sometimes I'll click off and work on something else. And so if I miss something important that's on the screen, I hate that. But that's kind of an excuse. The real reason is I just don't have the time. Post-production takes so much time. I already do a minimal amount of post-production for my music videos, and I'm way behind on those. And that's just the minimal amount. So, you know, the only way I can put out the kind of content I put out is just bam, bam, bam. And I'd like to think that having a successful Patreon, which who knows if it'll be successful or not, but, you know, we're hoping. I'd like to think that having a successful Patreon will give me the opportunity to do that. I don't see how it would give me more time because, like, people say they want to start, if they make enough money from XYZ, they'll quit their day job. I don't think, if I quit my day job, it would be because I can't do it for some reason or another. I love my day job. I don't want to quit it. But maybe if I make enough money from Patreon, I can hire an editor, someone else who can do it. That would have to be somebody, I think, who knows ceiling fans well enough to know the process and what's involved. It's something that, you know, if and when that's ever possible, we will revisit it. We will revisit it. What is your opinion of the new matte silver Hunter original? Is it a fan you ever recommend for installs? Well, first of all, I did a review video of it where I talked about it, and I love it. I think it's great. It's my favorite of the import originals for sure. Although I do like the hotel original, but the hotel original has issues. So, because it has the shitty shaft and all of that. So, I'm a big fan of the new original. I think they finally got the import original right this time. I have recommended it for a couple installs. It's not something... Most of the people that consult with me are commercial. And most commercial people they want efficiency and power and value. and gold lines can't be beat for that. I've definitely recommended it to a handful of people, mostly for residential installs. But again, it's a specific category. Not everybody was willing to spend $600 on a ceiling fan. Other thing I'll shout out about the Silver Hunter Original is I have heard from a reputable but unconfirmed source that it is discontinued, that they are not making any more silver ones. That was a limited edition finish for the some sort of anniversary, 30th anniversary of something. I don't remember what it was. I could actually look up what they told me. But I have heard that that has been discontinued. So, I do not. I would, if you want one, I would jump on it. Let me just see real quick, because I'm answering all these questions. I didn't do any prep work. Obviously, I wanted to read them for the first time on the air, if at all possible. I think I read some of the YouTube comments initially, because I replied to some of them. Let's see. 135th anniversary is, so 30th was a couple years off. So, okay. Cane or stencil? Yes. What pull chain switches do you like and why? I know some collectors just go mad for arcless pull chains. I am not somebody that puts that much thought into my pull chains. I do get a little bored with the kind of new generic. This is the only thing I have close by. It's just a Casablanca one, but there's nothing fancy about it. The ones you buy now, especially with the ones that are like half clear, half orange, I get it. They're kind of boring. But after I put it in a fan, I don't think about it anymore. A favorite would probably be Lavalier. It's very hard to find them working, but Lavalier are actually a different functionality. They're designed to be an all-angle pull chain, so, and they look cool and they're super vintagey. I love Lavalier. I love the ones that you found in blenders and early originals that are like all metal construction, but I've gotten shocked from one of those before, so I don't trust them as much. Yeah, I don't put a whole lot of thought into my pull chains. I get why people love arcless, and I love the long finial, but I don't give it too much thought after that. J-hook or ball and socket? Neither. I prefer the double claw like Moss used, or technically A&G was the first to use that. And I also prefer the new-tone mounting, which is kind of like a U-bolt with the claw. So it's like it's kind of like a smaller version of a Hunter Original with a U-bolt. Those are my favorite mounting systems. I like the Emerson one that like designers use that have the two hooks and the rub. It's like combining the two basically. Yeah, anything like that. Anything that's kind of real compact and low profile, but still designed to work with a belt canopy. I avoid ball socket just because it's not as versatile, and which is ironic because it's designed to be more versatile, but for the type of installs I do, it's actually less. And a lot of ball sockets are metal on metal. So I guess if I had to pick between those two, I'd say J-hook, but neither is my preferred mount. Okay, wow. I didn't think we were going to be 45 minutes in. That is a nice, long Q&A. I guess I could have made this 2 parts. Maybe I'll split it up. I don't know. We'll see. But in the meantime, for more exclusive content, please support our Patreon, patreon.com/dspiffy. Please like, comment, and subscribe to see more of these videos. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever your podcasts are sold. And please continue to support our sponsors, Fan Stick, Light Stick, Taco Burrito Mexico. Also, shout out to the Neon Fan Company, which has been a huge contributor to this channel as well. As always, thanks for watching.